Experiment with the family. See how well they hold their adjustment. And you cut down the frequency of visits. I routinely cut down to once a week. Once a week, I say every member of the family check their spine for subluxation. If they come in week after week not subluxated, then you can cut down the visits, cut down the frequency of visits. But if every time they come in they need an adjustment, then make sure they get it that regularly. Now, this involves money, doesn't it? When I first came to Peru, I'm talking about 30 years ago, I trained the Quechua Indians way, way up in the Andes. I trained them to identify subluxation. Why do you do that? Why? How? You must know how to check for subluxation. If you don't, is it time to go back to school? To learn what you should have learned in the first place. You can't call yourself a chiropractor until you know how to check for subluxation. You're practicing medicine if you're only checking the symptoms. How does it feel today? None of your damn business how it feels today. Your job is finding subluxation. Subluxation don't always identify themselves by bad feelings, by illness, by symptoms. If we walk out of here today, check the first half a dozen kids you see on the street. Are they subluxated? Probably. Almost every kid is subluxated as a child. And he never gets adjusted until 30 years later when he gets symptoms. And by then, the damage may well be permanent. First of all, you teach by example. If you want to change the mind of the public, you have to do what you say you do. You have to do to them what you say you do. I check the spine for subluxation. Do you? Do you check whole families for subluxations? Or do you just check the ones who have a backache or a stiff neck? The ones who come to you. No, when somebody comes to you, the first thing you have to do is be a teacher. Before you can be a chiropractor, you have to become a teacher of chiropractic. Now, that doesn't mean just teaching the sick person and telling them to tell their kids, because they don't know how. They don't even know how to explain your visit to a chiropractor to the spouse. If you want the spouse to understand, first rule, make your first appointment with husband and wife together. Why? Because the one who's getting adjusted may not be the one who has to pay for the kids. Both of them have to agree that chiropractic is a good idea. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a good idea to walk around subluxated? To raise subluxated kids? How long will it be before a subluxated child becomes an uncoordinated adult? If they're not adjusted as a child, they're going to grow up subluxated, sometimes creating permanent damage, resulting in permanent symptoms. And then you're going to become a symptom treater. Make up your mind. If you're going to be a chiropractor, you have to live it, not just talk about it. But having decided to live it, you then have to talk about it. You have to explain to the public what a chiropractor is, what a chiropractor does. Otherwise, where are you going to get your patients from? Where do people get chiropractic? Well, from you. Your duty must be to build your practice. If you're a trained chiropractor, you have the responsibility to teach people what you do and why. Not teach them how to do it. That takes a great deal of time and effort and concentration. If you didn't put in the time and the concentration, you didn't learn how to adjust. You didn't even learn how to find subluxation. You check everybody who comes in for subluxation. If they have one, you try to bring about the adjustment. And then, for God's sake, you post-check. The same thing you use to find the subluxation, you check again to find out if it's still there. If it is still there, your technique wasn't working on them. You know what you do? If the technique wasn't working on that person, send them to another chiropractor. Don't just keep working, accomplishing nothing. Your duty is that you get those people to another chiropractor who can adjust them. Maybe a different technique will work. Doesn't have to mean you learn all the techniques. But you have another guy in the nearby town that you could send somebody to who uses a different technique. So what do you say to the people? On day one, telephone rings, my husband's hurt his back. He can't stand straight. Can you help him? And you say, oh yes, we can help. You start lying on the first visit, or before the first visit. You start lying on the telephone. You make an appointment just for the sick person? Wrong. You want both members of the family there on the first visit. It's imperative. If you learn nothing else this weekend, learn this one thing. Your responsibility on that first telephone call is to make an appointment for both decision makers in the family, because you're going to talk about the kids. And you have them both come in together, and you sit them down, and you talk chiropractic. If you don't do that, if you just talk with one member of the family, you've explained chiropractic to them, and then they go home, and in 5 minutes, try and explain to the spouse what chiropractic is all about. How well can you explain chiropractic now? How will you be able to explain it after practice? And how well can the patient explain it after hearing your talk and repeating it back to her husband or back to his wife? You can't explain chiropractic until you fully understand it yourself. So you have both members of the family there, both to hear the message. That is imperative. If there's one thing I'd like you to change when you get back to your office tomorrow, is change your explanation of chiropractic so that everybody can understand it. First of all, drop the mystery. Drop the magical words. Any words that people cannot understand are the wrong words to use. They must be able to understand it and be able to explain it in their own words to somebody else. How are we going to get to all the people in Peru? Or all the people in Argentina? Or all the people anywhere? We don't talk to all the people. We don't have access to the public, to the mass media. So we'll set up our own media campaign. We'll talk to as many people as we can. Let's reinstate the layman lecture, where you sit down with a bunch of people at the same time and explain the details of chiropractic. Explain what a subluxation does to the human body. It interferes with the efficiency of the body by interfering with the messages getting through from the brain, through the spinal cord, to the end organs. When there's some efficiency caused by subluxation, then the subluxation must be corrected. Otherwise, the damage goes on and on and on and gets worse. Let's stop the damage. As soon as your kids get subluxated, bring them in and have their spine checked and get their subluxation corrected. Make sure they understand you by not talking at them. Include questions. Include opportunities for them to ask you questions. And make sure you give them honest answers. A subluxation always does damage. What is a subluxation? It's merely a tiny displacement of the bone. Explain the anatomy. So they realize the potential of the human body to screw up. If any of the messages from the brain get mixed up, then the body reacts improperly. It reacts to a situation that doesn't really happen. The body is aware of itself. If you want to think of a slogan, think of a chiropractic slogan. There's an innate awareness of every innate need. Now, what does that mean? The body is aware when something is wrong. It's aware of its own failings. There's an innate awareness. No secret. How does the body know that? I don't know. Neither do you. We don't have to know that. How it does it, we don't know. How the body corrects the subluxation, we don't know. We think we put the bone back in place. We don't know where the damn bone belongs. But there is an innate awareness of every innate need. If the body needs to move a bone, it knows that it needs to move a bone. And it sets about the movement of muscles so the bone can move itself. Well, actually, the muscles move the bone. Oh. Which muscles? That's for you to determine. That's why you're a chiropractor. You chose this profession. Your job is to bring about the correction of subluxation. When that is done, all you have to do is recheck the body on a regular basis to see if it's holding the adjustment or if it's remaining subluxated or gone back to being subluxated. And every time it goes back to being subluxated, you have to readjust. And as time goes by, the adjustment holds longer and longer and longer. It's funny. People tend to adjust and tend to subluxate in the same place all the time. Why is that? Why is it, B.J. Palmer said, when you have a subluxation, it keeps recurring? Because the shape of the bones never changes. Bones in a certain shape tend to subluxate in a certain direction. And ASRP is always an ASRP, except in cases of severe trauma, where the bone may be jarred into a different position. But generally, if the bone is jarred, it assumes the same position, the same relationship between it and the bone above or the bone below. So subluxation tends to recur. Doesn't always do it, but it tends to. That's the first place you look when a person comes back in the office. A person who has a low lumbar subluxation tends to get the same low lumbar subluxation again and again and again, every time the body is subjected to trauma. Maybe driving over mountain roads, you jar your spine, and the spine tends to jiggle in a certain direction. Which direction? That's determined by the shape of the bone. The bone only travels along the articular planes in relation to the one above or the one below or both. So people tend to subluxate in the same place every time. If you can tell that to people, and that you are trained to find the direction of subluxation, you're trained to find the presence of subluxation. You want to brag about something? Brag about your expertise in knowing about the body and being able to read whether subluxation occurs or doesn't occur. Do I have another part on this program? Yes?
Yes.
Good.